Howdy Cloud Gurus, and welcome to another episode of Azure Service Spotlight. I'm your host, Sean Johnson. Now today we're going to take a look at a service that's been around for some time and has recently gone through some exciting improvements. I'm talking about Azure Information Protection, or AIP. As we know, data comes in many different forms, be it documents, spreadsheets, email, or even pictures. Data is the lifeblood of technology. Historically, it's been of paramount importance that we keep our data protected. With the advent of the cloud, our data now moves between several different products and platforms. Protection is now more important than ever. This is where AIP comes into the picture. In this episode, we'll talk more in depth about what AIP is, why would we want to use it, and we'll see it in action. So let's get to it. AIP is Microsoft's cloud-based iteration of rights management service. It's used to classify your various data and protect it in a number of different ways. RMS dates back to Windows Server 2000. Back in the day, the solution was deployed on premises along with everything else in your infrastructure. In order for RMS to integrate with your other systems, there were multiple connectors and agents that were required to glue everything together. It was also a bit convoluted, so much so that many companies didn't bother with implementing it at all. If they did, a lack of user education made the experience less than pleasant. With AIP, we can leverage the cloud to implement classification of our various bits of data and apply or prohibit actions based on those classifications. Our data can then be protected across multiple applications such as Office apps like Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. Email and collaboration solutions such as Exchange, SharePoint, OneDrive, and Teams are also AIP aware. Even data products such as Power BI are being brought into the fold. We even have the ability to protect our data as it leaves our organization. AIP's robust solution allows our users to collaborate as seamlessly as they do now, while ensuring that our data stays where it belongs. In addition to protecting data in transit, AIP also allows us to protect at-rest data located on file servers and Windows workstations. So what has changed? Earlier versions of AIP were managed using the Azure portal. While this is still an option, the new way of creating and applying labels is done in the Microsoft 365 Compliance portal. You can still use the Azure portal, but it is scheduled to be deprecated in March of 2021. When I demo the product in a little bit, I'll be using this new method. There are a few prerequisites that we need to take into account when implementing AIP. First off, in order to take advantage of AIP, we need to have the proper subscription. Here we have several options. If you currently are subscribed to a Microsoft 365 Enterprise, Compliance, or Business plan, then you're probably already licensed for AIP. These plans include Azure Information Protection P1 or P2 licenses. As expected, P2 licenses expand on the capability of AIP, such as the ability to automatically classify data using labels. For those without one of these suites, P1 and P2 can be purchased standalone or as a part of the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite. I know that Microsoft licensing tends to be a bit confusing at times, so check out the pricing page listed in the resources for this video to get all the details, including a full rundown of the features available with each license. To support authentication and authorization for Azure Information Protection, you must have an Azure Active Directory. To use user accounts from your on-premises directory, such as Active Directory domain services, you must also configure directory integration, typically with Azure Active Directory Connect. Optional identity security features, such as single sign-on and multi-factor authentication, are also compatible with AIP, adding an extra layer of protection. As I stated earlier, Microsoft apps are AIP aware, so protected data can be viewed natively without the use of any client-side agents. However, other types of apps, such as mail clients that aren't aware, may need additional software to be able to view and access protected data. Typically, these applications reside on mobile devices. The good news is that iOS and Android clients exist to help us. There is also a unified signing client that end users can utilize to protect data on their local workstations. Now, I know you'd rather see AIP in action as opposed to hearing me drone on about it, so let's head to the demo where I will warn you, things did not go exactly as planned. Okay, Cloud Gurus, let's dive right into our demonstration of Azure Information Protection. We're going to be doing all of the administration for the product here in the Microsoft 365 Compliance Console. Historically, we've performed these steps in the Azure portal, but this just is another example of the integration between the Microsoft 365 administration tools and the Azure administration tools for things such as identity and information security. In order to test AIP using Office applications, I've created a Windows 10 virtual machine and connected it to our Azure AD tenant. In addition, I have installed the Azure AIP client. So before we create any labels or policies, we're going to have to establish criteria that we're going to be matching on in those labels and policies. And we do that here in data classification. And we're going to create a sensitive info type. When we pull up our sensitive info types, we can see that we have over 100 pre-configured information types that we can choose from. Things like credit card numbers, social security numbers, tax file numbers, driver's license numbers, etc. from different countries all over the world. We also have the ability to create a custom info type, and we're going to do that now for our fictitious project. We're going to call the info type Project Malmsteen, and we will describe it the same way. Next, we need to establish our requirements, and we're going to match on keywords, specifically the keyword of the project. We will leave everything else the same, click Next, and then Finish. We'll click No to test our sensitive type, and we're ready to move on. Next, we need to configure our label. The label is going to classify our data based on this information type. We go into Show All and then Information Protection. This is where we can create our labels and accompanying label policies. We're going to create a new label, but we're going to make it a sub-label of Highly Confidential. We'll name it accordingly. Now we need to scope what this label will actually do for us. We're going to apply it to files and emails as well as groups and sites. This includes things such as SharePoint and Microsoft 365 groups. We will choose to encrypt and mark our files. When we encrypt the file, we can configure permissions determining who has access to the data that is classified. I'm going to go ahead and assign permissions to everyone in my organization, but I'm not going to add anybody else. That includes anybody that exists outside of the organization. I'll click Save. And then one other thing I want to choose here is I want to never allow offline access. I don't want to give my users the ability to download this data and take it with them. They will only be able to access it online. Content marking is simply a header, footer, or watermark. I will choose to add a header here. For our project, it will be in nice big letters across the top of the header. Next, we can choose whether or not to auto-label our files and emails. As our users are composing data or editing existing files, AIP can be configured to allow us to auto-label these documents. This provides an extra level of protection as opposed to just having the users classify their data themselves. We'll detect based on our Project Malmsteen information type that we created earlier. And then we're going to specify that when the content matches these conditions to recommend that the user apply the label. We also can automatically apply that label for them, but we're going to give them a little bit of flexibility. Next, we can define our settings for our groups and sites like teams. The privacy option simply specifies which users in our organization or externally can be added and have access to our teams or 365 groups. I'm going to select private, giving only users within our organization access to our groups. We'll click Next all the way through and get our label created. Now that our label has been created, we will click Done, and we will then see it there at the bottom of our list of labels. In order for our users to be able to classify data with that label, we need to create a policy. So we'll do that by clicking on Label Policy and then clicking on Publish Label. We will choose our sensitivity labels to publish, and we're going to choose two. Not only are we going to choose our Project Malmsteen label, but since it's the sub-label of the highly confidential parent, we need to select that one as well. We will apply this to everybody. And then here are some additional policy settings that dictate what our users will have to do in order to work with this data. We are going to select that our users provide justification to remove our label or lower its classification. If they're trying to circumvent our security policy, we want to know about it. I also want to require our users to apply a label to any groups or SharePoint sites. We'll name our policy, click Next, and Submit. And our new policy has been created and is now ready for our users to use. So first, let's see AIP in action when we attempt to create a new team. I'm going to create a team, and then we're going to create a team from scratch. Notice that we don't have any options for the privacy settings of our team. That's because we have to apply a label before we can go any further. Remember, in our sensitivity policy, we require a label for any teams or groups. Once I select Project Malmsteen, I'm able to select the private privacy type. Why not public? Well, remember that our Project Malmsteen label specifically states that only internal users to our organization are allowed to be members of our teams. We'll name the team accordingly, and it allows us to create the team. Let's add a few members to the team. We'll use a couple of members that belong to our organization and click Add. So let's now try to add somebody who isn't a member of our organization. Notice how if I attempt to enter an email address that exists outside of our tenant, we don't get any matches and therefore cannot choose to add any members. So Azure Information Protection has given us the ability to properly secure our teams so that only internal members can have access. Let's go ahead and populate the team with a few sample documents. Selected a couple of Word files, an Excel spreadsheet, and a PowerPoint presentation. We'll work with those in a little bit. So now that we've seen AIP protect our teams, let's actually look at it protect some of our data itself. I'm using the web version of Word, and I'm going to open up a blank document. In the document, I'm going to type in the words Project Malmsteen. Now what should be happening is that we should be getting a recommendation, and there it is, with our policy tip saying that it's recommended that we change the sensitivity to highly confidential Project Malmsteen. Let me click Change Now, and that label will be applied to the document. If we click on Sensitivity, we see highly confidential and Project Malmsteen have been checked. Let me close the document and reopen it. And we see that the label still exists and is maintained. Let's remove the label and see what happens. We're being required to provide justification as to why we want to change this label. Remember, this is configured in our sensitivity policy to audit anytime a user wants to circumvent the parameters of data classification. I will choose that the previous label no longer applies and click Change. When I do that, the label is removed. Let's head back into Teams and take a look at some of the documents that we pre-populated a few minutes ago. Let's open up a different file type, for example, an Excel spreadsheet. We're going to open it up in Teams, which is simply a front end for Excel Online. The purpose of the report is Project Malmsteen. It has already been entered in there for us, and just like that, we have the recommendation once again to change the sensitivity to highly confidential / Project Malmsteen. We'll close the document and let's just try one more. Let's try a PowerPoint presentation. We'll open it up in Teams, and unfortunately, we're not seeing our recommendation like we saw with our Word and Excel files. We still have the ability to manually classify the data, but this should work as it were an Excel document or a Word document. So a little disappointing not to see that here. We can close the document and attempt to open it one more time. And once again, we are not being asked to change the sensitivity or apply the label. So a little disappointing there. Let's try opening these documents in the installed versions of Word, Excel, and PowerPoint and see if the behavior is any different. It shouldn't be, but let's test. We'll create a new blank document and we will type in Project Malmsteen. As we sit here waiting, we notice that we are not prompted with a recommendation to change our label. But if we click up on sensitivity, we can manually apply that label. That's great, but we'd really like that to be automatically recommended for us. You see, when we change the label that the header changes to Project Malmsteen, we specified that header in our label that we created for the project. Let's try an Excel document. We'll create a new blank workbook. And once again, type in our keywords. Verify that our label is available to be applied manually, and it is. But unfortunately, we are not seeing the automatic recommendation. So we'll apply it manually. In any case, it's a bit inconsistent as it worked in web versions of Word and Excel and not in PowerPoint, and doesn't appear to be working at all in any of the locally installed version of Office. Let's go ahead and try to email the file to somebody outside of the organization. Remember, when we created the label, we specifically set our encryption settings to allow only those inside of our organization co-author access to the file. We didn't specify that it could be shared or accessed with anyone outside of the organization. Let's send a new email, and I will choose an external contact. Let's attach the expense report that we classified manually earlier in the demonstration. So because not only have we given this email message a subject name of Project Malmsteen, we've also attached a document that has previously been protected with the label Project Malmsteen. So when I attempt to hit send, it should prompt me recommending that I apply the Project Malmsteen label to the email. Let's see if it happens. And unfortunately, it doesn't. It's allowing this message to go straight to that external recipient. Let's try it one more time. I'm going to send the email message to the same external email address, and I'm going to label it accordingly. I'll attach the expense report once again, except this time I'm going to manually set my Project Malmsteen label. We can see that it's been applied in the tooltip bar, and we're going to click send. We'll get an alert here about rights management. We'll click OK and let the email go. If we take a look in sent items and look at the latest one we just sent, notice that we have the header that we specified in our label, so we know that this message in its entirety has been protected with rights management or with AIP, versus the one we had sent just previously. We're relying on AIP protection solely for the attachment itself, not the entire email message. Well, why does that matter? Well, it matters if I were to put specific confidential information anywhere in the body of this email, it would not be protected unless we did so manually. So once again, automatic labeling and recommendations is really not working the way it is supposed to. Let's head over to my Gmail account that I've created and has been set up as a recipient for these emails and kind of look at the behavior as it exists for somebody who is outside of our organization. Okay, I'm looking at my inbox and I see two new email addresses. The older one is, you can see, unencrypted and allows me to click on the expense report.xlsx attachment. Let's go ahead and give this a shot, and we can't preview the file. Remember that our label that we created for Project Malmsteen only allows online file access. We do not have the ability to view the file offline, which means you can't preview this file either. Let's open up the email message and we will try to download it. Okay, we are able to download the message, so let's see if I can open it. I'm being asked to authenticate, and even though I do not have a Microsoft account for this tenant or a Microsoft account for this email address in general, I'm going to go ahead and put the email address in here to see what the behavior looks like. All right, since I do not have a valid Microsoft account for this email address, it's going to be sending a verification code to my Gmail address so that I can use it to attempt to log in to access the file. I have received the email and I'm going to enter the code here and click on sign in. And whew, good. We do not have permission to open this workbook. Again, our label specifies that only people internal to our organization have access to this workbook. I am not a member of this organization and therefore I do not have access. So AIP has successfully protected me from opening this potentially confidential data. Let's go back in and take a look at the second message that I sent myself. Remember, this message was encrypted in its entirety using the AIP label for Project Malmsteen, and you can see that the message body looks a lot different than the one that we saw before. This one's specifically stating that the message in its entirety has been protected and that I will need to log in to attempt to view the message. So if I click on read the message, I immediately receive the notification that I don't have permission to view the message. So because I don't have access, I can't access any of the data within the message body, nor any associated attachments. So message encryption and protection is working via email, and that's great. There are obviously a few things in AIP that work very, very well, and it looks like a few things need a little bit of work. As you can see, this demo was a bit challenging. So, what's the verdict? AIP is a way to protect our data in transit and at rest. Advanced protection, such as automatic classification of data, allows us to make sure that our data stays where we want it. The flexibility to work across multiple products and platforms allows our users to collaborate seamlessly while maintaining data integrity. There are a few drawbacks. Initial configuration, especially the creation of labels and data types, can be a bit daunting or outright frustrating. There are also many other settings that must be configured outside of the compliance portal in order for everything to work as expected. This is typically only expected at first, but something to be considered. While not a drawback per se, it's imperative that users are kept in the loop and properly educated on not only creating protected content, but accessing it as well. Failure to put in a proper project and communication plan could derail your AIP implementation before it even starts. The great news is Microsoft offers some user-level documentation, including a user guide for the labeling client. Finally, as we all know, users can sometimes be a bit standoffish when it comes to adoption of new technology. If you're not using automatic classification as a failsafe, your users may simply choose to share data the way they always have, and that's unprotected. Which leads me to perhaps the biggest drawback of them all. As we saw in the demo, automatic classification and labeling, specifically in regards to label recommendation, is inconsistent at best. We saw it work for some apps and not for others. When the feature is touted as being able to automatically help us protect our data, it's kind of important that it works well. At this time, it really doesn't appear to be the case. Maybe AIP was just having a bad day, but based on feedbacks from others in the industry, that's probably not what was happening. So should you invest, evaluate, or revisit? My recommendation is to revisit. Data protection is crucial, and in theory, AIP contains everything required to get the job done. However, as we saw firsthand, it doesn't quite work as advertised. With a recently announced certification on information protection about to be released, here's to hoping that the product will quickly live up to our expectations. So that about wraps things up. If you like what you saw, give us a thumbs up. If you didn't, we'll blame Lars. Either way, keep being awesome cloud gurus, and I hope to see you next time on Azure Service Spotlight.